it's pretty late. I mean, these have been a long 3 days. So at first, I was, going to give this talk about more or less finished paper. But then Orestes said, "Oh, today is going to be really informal." So then I put on my sweatshirt, sort of changed my handout a bit. So I want to make this more of a sort of brainstormy thing. So I want to sort of try out some ideas on you and get your intuitions, get your thoughts on what group knowledge could be, basically. So I started thinking about collective epistemology a while ago, so group belief, group knowledge, that sort of thing. And that led me to consider some more methodological or foundational questions. Because it seemed to me that insofar as there is a growing literature on collective epistemology, people tend to sort of say slightly different things about what they take group belief and group knowledge to be. And it seemed to me that what's lacking is sort of a good discussion of some of the more foundational questions. So that's sort of what I've started to think about now. And so what I have in mind when I say group knowledge, what I have in mind is something that looks very much like individual knowledge. So I'm thinking of group knowledge sort of along the lines of individual knowledge. So I'm trying to find out whether there are states that groups can be in that are sufficiently like individual knowledge that they would warrant true descriptions of group knowledge, right? Okay, so as I said yesterday in my talk, we talk about group knowledge and group belief quite often. So we ascribe knowledge to various sorts of groups. So I'm not going to repeat that. So I think some of those things can be explained away quite easily. In the sense that when you think about them, they're really not about group knowledge in any literal sense. So when we say things like physicists have discovered the Higgs boson, we really mean like actually, that's not a good example, that's a bad example. Sorry about that example. I was going to say, we don't literally mean all of the physicists, we're just going to mean a small group, but it's still a group of physicists, so forget about that. Anyway, so there goes my example. Anyway, so some of these...
The Netherlands scored against England.
Yeah, except there's no knowledge being ascribed there, right?
Yeah, but some person would do
That's sort of the idea, yeah.
It's still a group.
Good, yeah. Alright, so some of those descriptions are mere figures of speech. Good. There's also something you might want to call distributed knowledge, and sometimes we sort of speak loosely to describe that sort of thing, so there's a group of people who all have bits and pieces of information, and were you to put those bits and pieces together, you could learn something new, you could acquire a new piece of knowledge. So in a sense, the group is, you might say, in a position to know, so the knowledge is distributed among them. Again, I don't think that's sort of group knowledge in any literal sense. So here's something that gets a little closer. So sort of summative ways of construing group knowledge. So there's what you might want to call shared knowledge. So a group of people and all the individuals in the group know the same thing, the same proposition. Is that group knowledge? Well, maybe not quite. Why not? Well, because it's just a bunch of individuals who happen to know the same thing. I suppose that all of us in this room know that it's raining outside. Would we therefore say that the group that's in this room knows that it's raining outside? All the individuals do. It's a group? It seems kind of doubtful, but I'll get back to it. So, I mean, maybe if you sort of add something more to this, you get closer to the idea of genuine group knowledge. So I call this common knowledge here. So that's a situation where, again, we have all the individuals who know a certain proposition, but it's also the case that all the individuals know of each other that they know this proposition. So is that group knowledge? Well, again, it seems to be that people have sort of different intuitions about this. So some people seem to have really strong intuitions, and they want to say, no, this is not group knowledge, because there's nothing sort of going on that's robust at the group level. We can just rewrite this as a long conjunction of claims about what individuals know. I'm kind of on the fence about this, so I'd be curious to hear more about what you think, whether this could be a genuine sense of group knowledge. Anyway, so all of these brief examples raise the question of how do you decide whether something really is group knowledge? I mean, what we do in the individual case, we often sort of we look at examples and we have sort of general platitudes in mind about what knowledge is. But how does that work for groups? So here are a few things I think we need to think about. So this is section 2 in the handout. So what are the minimal conditions for something to count as a case of group knowledge? So I think the first thing we should say is that the involvement of a group should be a necessary thing. It shouldn't just be that the group is contingently involved. So what I mean by that, it might be that in some cases it just happened to be the case that a piece of knowledge was acquired by a group, but an individual might as well have done it by herself. So in those sorts of cases, it doesn't seem that the group is essential or necessary anymore. So I guess one condition of group knowledge would be that the group is somehow involved in a necessary way. What sort of necessity am I talking about here? Well, it's going to be relativized to what humans, beings like us, can do. So if it's necessary for beings like us that there's going to be a bunch of us to have this knowledge or to acquire this knowledge, then that might give rise to a sense of group knowledge. So not necessary in any sort of strong metaphysical sense, I think. Okay, so second, and so as I said, this is kind of brainstormy, so I know, I realize that I'm being sort of rather vague and I'm not going to give any precise analysis here, but this is just to get the thinking going. Alright, so the second condition that a lot of people seem to want to accept is, so it says non-reductive involvement of a group there. What I actually mean is irreducible involvement of a group. Sorry about that. This is something that people like Margaret Gilbert and others stress. So for there to be genuinely robustly collective knowledge, it shouldn't be the case that collective knowledge is somehow reducible to individual knowledge. And that's what people think is wrong with the analysis of shared knowledge and common knowledge that I gave above before. So they think, because those cases can easily be reduced to claims about individual knowledge, they aren't genuine instances of group knowledge. But what exactly does it mean here to say that a case of group knowledge can be reduced to claims about the individuals? So what people seem to have in mind, I think, is that group knowledge can be reduced to individual knowledge if you can sort of rewrite a claim about group knowledge as a long conjunction of claims about individual knowledge. Right? So it's going to be claims about what all the individuals in the group know. And if that's the case, then we have a reduction. And it's not going to be genuine group knowledge. So I think, that seems kind of sensible and plausible to me. But on the other hand, it's also going to be the case that any instance of group knowledge, if there really is such a thing, is in some sense going to be reducible to the beliefs, the actions, the decisions of the individuals in that group. Right? It's not as if groups are going to do things on their own, independently of the individuals in the group. So I'm sort of confused by why people think that when you can rewrite a claim about group knowledge as a conjunction of claims about individual knowledge, that's sort of a kind of reduction that leads to denying that there is group knowledge, whereas any case of group knowledge is still going to be, you could rewrite it as a large conjunction about claims, maybe not only about individual knowledge, but also individual decisions, individual beliefs, desires, actions. So again, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. Alright, so here's a point that sort of connects to Orestes' talk before. As I said at the beginning, I'm interested in group knowledge as a state that a group can be in. So I'm really interested in knowledge possession and not so much knowledge production. I think it's pretty obvious that there are a lot of cases of knowledge that only groups of people can produce because they're simply, they involve too much evidence or evidence that requires very different sets of expertise. And if that's the case, then it's going to be knowledge that's only going to be producible by a group of people and not by any individual. But of course, saying that knowledge has been produced by a group and even saying that it's essential or necessary that's been produced by a group doesn't mean we should ascribe knowledge to the group as a subject, right? So a lot of scientific knowledge seems to be like this. You need a bunch of people to acquire it, but then individuals actually possess it. So what I'm interested in is possession, in the sense that the group really has to be the subject of the knowledge state. Okay, so being in a position to know versus knowing, I'm interested in the latter. So I talked about this before briefly. Also, you don't want any account of group knowledge to be such that it sort of automatically generalizes and makes every case of testimonial knowledge a case of group knowledge. Because there's an obvious sense in which, when you acquire a piece of testimonial knowledge, there's more than one person involved, right? So it's sort of necessary in the case of testimonial knowledge that there be a group of people. But you don't want to say that any case of testimonial knowledge is going to be a case of group knowledge. So that's something an analysis of group knowledge is going to need to avoid. Alright, so in other papers I've actually defended two different ways of understanding group belief and group knowledge. I'm not going to sort of rehearse all that here, so you can try to argue for it at length, or at nauseam, some might say, in those papers. So I'm not going to do that here, so I'm just going to give you the flavor of these sort of two different strategies that I have talked about before. And then, yeah, that's sort of what I want to do, and then I'm going to throw it open for discussion, and I'd like to hear more about whether you think there are other senses of group knowledge. Alright, so the first, I'm just going to give you some examples to give you the idea of how that might work. So the first strategy that a lot of people have written about is to make sense of group knowledge by collectivizing the belief condition. So people sort of try and construe a legitimate sense of group belief, and once you have that, if there's collective belief, then you might think if that belief meets certain further conditions, then you're going to get a sense of group knowledge, because the belief is a collective belief. And this is sort of a default example that people talk about, a job search committee. So members of the committee get together to decide who's the best candidate for a job. They discuss the department's needs, the candidate's dossiers, credentials, performance, etc. Although the committee members all have a different belief, there should be the word different there, all have a different belief about who the best candidate is, they all put Anna in second place. They then, through the use of some agreed upon procedure, decide that it will be the committee's view that Anna is the best candidate. The thought is, once a group does this, there's a group belief. There's actually, I think, a lot of work that needs to be done to really make it plausible that this is really a case of group belief, because I think a lot depends here on the group's motivation for accepting this as a case of, or as the group's view. I mean, it might be that the group merely accepts it for pragmatic reasons, because they think it's going to be better for the relations in the department if they accept this as the group's view, whereas it seems that belief has this sort of intrinsic connection to truth, right? So I think you actually need to add further conditions to the basic story here to really make it a case of group belief rather than just group acceptance. But that's the story I try to develop in another paper. So could this also be a case of group knowledge? Well, I think it's plausible that it could be. And how is that going to work? Well, do we need to make a case that in this example here or in similar ones, the group's view also meets whatever further conditions there are for knowledge, right? So you not only have a group belief, but also something like safety, sensitivity, or virtue condition, whatever. Well, it seems, it's going to need work, but it seems pretty plausible to me that a group belief could meet those further conditions, right? Maybe if the procedure that they've used is a procedure that's in fact reliable, or something that sort of guarantees that the resulting belief is going to be safe. So it seems to me that this might work. So this gives you one possible sense, I think, of group knowledge. And this is sort of robustly collective or robust group knowledge, because there really is something, it's not a mere sum of the individual groups and individual knowledge. Alright, good. So that's one sense of group knowledge. want to get you to believe that there is another sense of group knowledge, I have sort of three cases there that build up to the idea. The first one is actually not a case of group knowledge, I think, but it's sort of useful as a foil for the other cases. So, counting party people. Sounds like a fun thing to do. Alright, so Alice wants to know how many people there are at her party. To find out, she asks Bertrand to count the number of people in the living room, Courtney to count the number of people in the garden, and Deborah to count the number of people upstairs. Alice herself then adds the numbers and informs Bertrand, Courtney, and Deborah about the total number. So here, what we have here is sort of merely contingent involvement of a group. Alice probably could have easily done it herself, I mean, assuming, I don't know how big the party was, but let's assume she could have easily done it herself. And there's just sort of testimonial knowledge here, so the other people share what they know with Alice. So this is not a case, I think, of group knowledge, and there's even no group belief here. But what about the next case? So happiness research. This is an actual thing, as something I know. So Mary is a social scientist with excellent training in research, design, fieldwork, database creation and maintenance, and statistics, who is investigating how people's perceived happiness develops over the course of time and how it correlates with various other social and political factors such as wealth, health, social welfare and support, personal freedom, etc. To justify her claims about correlating factors, she analyzes data from the World Database of Happiness, which is located in Rotterdam. Yes, it is. Which contains vast amounts of analyzable data on people's perceived happiness. This data has been collected by numerous researchers and assistants all over the world. So what's going on? I think what we have here is a case of what I've called practically necessary epistemic dependence. Right? So there's a huge amount of data, and there's just no way in which Mary could have collected all that data by herself. I mean, it's not that she doesn't have the required skills or expertise for it, because she has excellent training in all that's required for collecting the data. It's just that there's so much, she can't do it by herself. So it's practically necessary that there is a group of people involved. So does this give rise to a sense of group knowledge, if there's this practical necessity? Well, you might think yes, because the justification or the warrant, or whatever you think is necessary for knowledge, is something that's only available with a group of people, once there is a group of people providing it or creating it. So that's one way to argue that it might be a case of group knowledge. But on the other hand, I'm sort of inclined to say, well, what we have here is collective knowledge production, and not so much collective knowledge possession. Because once all the evidence is there, it's sort of Mary that does the actual processing. And so, of course, she relies on all these other people in the way, I guess, that you're relying on testimony in other cases. But the actual knowledge possession, it seems, is still the one who actually possesses the knowledge. The subject of the knowledge is Mary, I'm inclined to think in this case. But maybe Orestes thinks otherwise, because I mean, this looks like a case that resembles the kind of things you were talking about. Alright, so here is the third case, and this I think is a genuine case of group knowledge. So it's a case about Dr. X, who, for reasons unknown to me, Dr. X prefers to remain anonymous. I don't know why I didn't put in a name there. Alright, so Dr. X is involved in a large multidisciplinary project to build a complex apparatus to measure brain activity with several other scientists from neighboring specializations and fields. Dr. X's contribution to the project requires her to know several specific propositions about how one component of the brain scanner works. Dr. X has some grasp of how the scanner as a whole is supposed to work, but she does not understand fully how several other components work. On her own, she is certainly not justified in believing many claims about the workings of various other components, since that requires expertise in fields different from her own. And the same goes for all team members. So when Dr. X considers a claim about how the scanner as a whole produces its output, she is inevitably epistemically dependent on her colleagues. So this is a case not just of practically necessary epistemic dependence, but also what I've called cognitively necessary epistemic dependence. And what I mean by that is that there's just no way that any individual human being, so like Dr. X or any other human is going to have all the required expertise to see what justifies the claim that she believes. So, yeah, I mean, it just can't be done. It would require too much training and education for any one individual. Now, does this give rise to a sort of a collectivized justification or a warrant condition? Because that's what I'm trying to get at here. I think that's going to depend on how you think about justification or warrant. And why do I say that? Well, you might argue that in this case, it's just, again, a matter of testimonial justification, testimonially required justification. So Dr. X has testimonial knowledge about all the other components, and the seed of knowledge is still the individuals who rely on testimonial knowledge for some of what they believe about the apparatus, some of what they know about it. But when you think about something like scientific knowledge or understanding or sort of high-grade knowledge, so the kind of thing that Saussure calls reflective knowledge, and John Greco, I think, calls understanding. So that's a kind of knowledge that requires more. It requires a genuine insight in the justification, the reasons for your belief. So you need to really grasp the grounds for your belief and be able to reproduce them to see why they make your belief plausible, likely to be true. So I think when you think about this kind of high-grade knowledge, it's going to be very plausible that only the group possesses that high-grade knowledge in a primary way. And why is that? Well, because only the group, that is to say, with the various individuals that compose a group, have this sort of insight in the grounds for the relevant belief. So no individual has that insight because no individual has all the required expertise. Only the group as a whole has that high-grade knowledge. So I think that's another sense of collective knowledge. But this is only going to be true for the kind of high-grade knowledge that requires something like an internalist-like justification. Good. So I've tried to sort of sketch two ways in which you might understand group knowledge, and I think both of these are legitimate senses of group knowledge. There might be more. So what I've said so far, it might be that there are other ways of collectivizing either the belief condition or the justification or warrant condition. And I think, so I'm sort of, this is something I'm thinking about now. Yeah, I mean, thinking about it now, but sort of now in a more extended sense, right? Not literally. Okay. So what I've tried to show is that there's this group knowledge when you require this strong internalist justification, but I would actually be interested to hear what you think, whether that could also be, when you sort of run with a more externalist notion of justification or warrant, whether that could give rise to a sense of group knowledge. So you need to have a case in which the group as a whole is necessary for the production of an externalist kind of warrant or justification. And it has to be necessary in sort of irreducible sense, and that, I guess, let me just stop here because I'm just kind of babble on and not make things any better. Okay, thanks for your attention.